B.
So there's one person that wants to see. How about
Christina, what's the call-in number? Does Dan have that?
I don't know.
I just said if you can't make it, call in if you can. I'll see what he responds with.
quick meeting?
Thank you.
I don't know why they're muted.
So we don't have Shauna on the line yet, do we?
Well, I've got Worst, but he says I need to unmute him, and I don't know how.
He's got to push *6 on his phone to unmute.
Brian, push *6.
I'm on the line. I keep getting muted every time I do *6.
We heard you that time, Shauna.
Well, we hear you now, Shauna, so thank you.
All right, Shauna, I guess we can go. We've got a quorum with Shauna. Oh, hold on just a second. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain. Okay, you can go ahead.
Oh, no, I see it.
Okay, Kevin, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Are we good on YouTube?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
I hereby call the May 10th City Council meeting to order for Millwood. It is 7:02 p.m. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Daniel, do you want to lead us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kevin, are you ready?
Yeah, Christina, would you please take attendance to establish a quorum tonight?
Mayor Freeman,
Present.
Councilmember Van Hees,
Here.
Councilmember Sander, Councilmember Kohler,
Here.
Councilmember BC.
Here.
So we also have an attendance. Can you hear me? Yeah, we do hear you, Brian. So we also have an attendance tonight. We have our city clerk, Christina Jansen. We have our treasurer, Deborah Mackin. We have our public works director, Paul Allen, and our city attorney, Brian Wurst. So at this time, I would ask if there is a motion on the approval of tonight's agenda for the regular meeting as presented.
This is Councilman Culler. I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Just the regular agenda. So just to be clear, folks, we're just approving tonight's regular agenda. We have not moved on to the consent agenda yet.
Oh, sorry, agenda.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Council members in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, tonight's agenda is approved unanimously. That brings us to our fire department report from Spokane Valley Fire Department from Chief Soto.
Good evening, council members. I will be bringing this evening's fire department incident response numbers for the city of Millwood. So, is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. If we could have the next page, please. Excellent. So for the month of April, we had 18 incident call-outs, 911 call-outs here in the city of Millwood. Next page. Those 18 calls generated 13 responses. You can see on the map on the right in blue are the areas that we responded to. The areas in pink are also areas that we responded to, but they were other units that came into this district in order to help facilitate with calls. Next slide, please. Of those calls, these are the top 5 call responses. You'll see that number 1 was 17 falls. Not 17 falls, but the coding, dispatch coding is 17. We had 4 of those that were falls. We had 2 psych patient calls, 2 unknown calls, 2 unconscious calls, and 2 difficulty breathing calls. Overall, 94.44% of the calls were for EMS. Through the year to date, we've had a total of 91 responses, 911 call-outs. And you can see on the right where the bulk of those calls are in those areas with the numbers with the bubbles. Next slide, please. Those 91 call-outs generated 72 responses. Again, the responses are generally lower than the call-outs because there are cancellations that do occur. So we had 72 year-to-date responses. And again, you can see the locations of where we mainly respond to. Next slide, please. The top 5 calls for year-to-date are 11 sick calls, 6 unknown calls, 6 psych calls, 5 unconscious calls, and 4 difficulty breathing calls. Just for your own edification, on the 32 unknown calls, it's not that we don't know what the call is. Then when the caller calls in, it's generally, hey, I don't know what's wrong, but there's something not right and there's something wrong. So that's why we do code it differently from the standpoint of is it an EMS call versus a fire call. But just so you know, we do know what it is when we get there. It just comes in as
We don't know what you're going to. Just get out there.
So, and through the year to date, 90% of the calls are EMS in nature. Next slide. So this slide, what we want to show you is that overall on the very bottom right, the 12.5%, that is the call volume where we're at above last year's numbers. So if you recall, last year was a record year of 911 calls and responses for the Spokane Valley Fire Department. We were almost 22% ahead of 2020 with 2021's numbers, and this year so far we're 12.5% ahead of last year's numbers, which is actually just where we were at this same time last year, only 12.5% ahead of that. So nothing has slowed down. So just so you know, things are still going. Now, most of the numbers on your right, some of them are really big numbers. But if you look at the, like the 36, there's 1, 3, 2, and it shows 200%. I mean, those numbers are wonky because it's just a small percentage of calls. So if you have 2 at bats and you strike out once, you're batting 500. So I just want to make sure that we understand that some of those numbers are a bit deceiving. But if you look at the 31A/B/T and 31C-D/E and go all the way across, those are real numbers there. So your 31ABT, those are alpha calls, EMS in nature, so non-emergent, and the 31CDE, those are your emergent calls, and you can see that one of them is up 16% and one of them is up almost 12%. So EMS is definitely still going hard and strong. Next slide, please. So, oh boy, I'm sorry that is awfully small, but I will share with you everything that's on there. So first we'll go over significant events. So at the April 25th Fire Commissioner meeting, our Board of Fire Commissioners, our board unanimously voted to implement a levy lid lift, a multi-year levy lid lift specifically. This levy lid lift will raise our current dollar 1.045 on the $1,000 assessed value. We are going to raise that or present it to the voters on August 2nd in order to raise that to the $1.50 for $1,000 assessed value. Collection would start in 2023, and it would go for the 5 succeeding years at a minimum of 1% while meeting the CPIW, but not to go more than 6%. So right now that we are looking to put that on the ballot August 2nd. The second thing that we have is May is our Wildfire Awareness Month. So if you follow us on social media, and I hope that you do, you will see that we are talking about everything from defensible space to just making sure when you mow your lawn or park your vehicle that you make sure that you are aware of where you're at so we don't start a wildland fire. It's very bad right now, especially in the Southwest. New Mexico and Arizona are just completely burning up. So we need to make sure that we are careful and our situational awareness is very high. Lastly, on our significant events is we started a recruit academy on May the 2nd. We have 11 new firefighters in there. There's a total of 12. We have one firefighter from the Cheney Fire Department that's also participating with our personnel. However, we're hoping to get them out by September. So far, so good. Significant events. The first one is not a typo. We had a trampoline into a power pool. It does get windy, and when those things are not strapped down, they are like a giant kite, and they will take off in the air. Thank goodness nobody was injured, and there was no down power lines, and our guys took care of the incident there. The second is we had an alarm system that went off. We had it as a female that was trying to light bricks on fire. Yes, it happens. Yeah, this one was not a 32 unknown, so we did know what this one was, and so illegal burning. However, we didn't find anybody when we got there, and there was no fires, so all was good. Our third major incident was we had a motor vehicle crash, semi-truck, a sedan had rear-ended a semi-truck. However, there was no injuries, so we took care of it, passed it on to PD, and then cleared the scene. Finally, we did have one possible illegal burn call out, but it turns out that it was just a small legal fire. Everything was good. We made sure the scene was safe, and we left. So at this time, that's all I have to report, and I'm here for any questions. That's a good question, sir.
Mayor, do you have any questions?
I'd just like to thank you guys for coming out. Somebody hit the power pole in front of our house on Empire.
Oh, okay.
And broke it in half.
Oh.
And I wasn't home. My wife was in the driveway with our son when it happened. And your guys calmed her down.
Oh, good.
I was like 5 minutes behind.
That's
And
awesome.
I was coming home from baseball, so I had bats in my hand. I was ready to go. It got taken care of very quickly.
That's great to hear. You know,
Appreciate
when those things go off, it sounds like gunfire.
Yeah.
It is that loud, the popping sound. You can feel it bounce off your chest.
Yeah,
and
it broke it in half and uprooted the power pole.
yeah, and if you're close enough, you can get the effects of electricity. So I'm glad to hear that no
Yeah.
people's injured. So,
They were all in very great moods.
oh, good. They never felt more alive, sir. Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. You all have a great evening.
Mayor, are you there?
He's sleeping.
Well, now should I just,
I am here now. I'm sorry, my bad. Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate your report, and that brings us to item number 6 tonight, our consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of item 6A, accepting the April 2022 Treasurer's Report, claims and payroll vouchers. Item 6B, a revised task order 2203, which is a park survey and subdivision. And item 6C, the acceptance of the minutes from the April 12th regular meeting of the City Council. Would any member of the council like to take any items individually? Not hearing anyone request to take any of those consent agenda items individually. So at this time, I would be looking for a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
this is Councilman Keller. I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from the council? Not hearing or seeing any by video. All in favor of approval of accepting the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing or seeing none opposed, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. That brings us to item number 7, which is an executive session. I do not believe we have any need for an executive session tonight. So that brings us to our action items. Action item 8A is Historic Preservation Commission appointments. Ms. Jansen, will you take the lead on those, please?
Yes. So after a number of years with vacancies on our Historic Preservation Commission, we have been lucky enough to receive interest from 2 individuals who are new residents here in Millwood. Colleen Kirsten and Alex Brannon have both submitted letters expressing interest in joining the Historic Preservation Commission. They did meet with Mayor Freeman, and so this evening we are asking for the council's approval of the appointment of these individuals to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Does anybody have any questions from the council regarding the memos regarding Ms. Kirsten or Mr. Brannon? If there are no questions, I would look for a motion to appoint Ms. Kirsten to the Historic Preservation Commission.
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
I will second that. Motion to approve.
Andy, you're slow. Do it all at once or don't do it. So we do have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Not seeing or hearing any discussion from the council. All in favor of the motion to appoint Ms. Kirsten to the Historic Preservation Commission, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Not hearing any opposed, Ms. Kirsten is approved unanimously. same motion for Mr. Brannon is I would be looking for a motion to approve Mr. Brannon to the appoint Mr. Brannon to the Historic Preservation Commission.
I'll make a motion to appoint Mr. Brannon to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor of appointing Mr. Brannon to the Historic Preservation Commission, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, Mr. Brannon is approved unanimously for appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission. That brings us to item number 6B, which is the City Council appointment. In your packet, there is an applicant memo and an application to appointment for the vacant City Council position. We received from Ms. From Ms. McLaughlin's resignation, we received one person expressing interest in appointment to the City Council. That was Mr. Kelly Stravens, currently chair of the Millwood City Planning Commission. It is with honor I do ask that Mr. Stravens be considered by the council for appointment to the City Council. He's done a fine job, served 3 terms as a Planning Commission member, and currently serves as chair of the Planning Commission. And I think he would be a asset to the council. He would end up serving out the remainder of Ms. McLaughlin's term. Do I have any questions from the council regarding Mr. Stravens' application to fill Ms. McLaughlin's remainder of her term? So, Mr. Wurst or Ms. Jansen, is there any other comments regarding appointment of Mr. Stravens either of you need to make?
I don't have anything.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah. No, I would just, having worked with Mr. Stravens on the Planning Commission for a number of years, I would just echo the sentiment expressed by the mayor. Well, it's a loss to the Planning Commission. Unfortunately, it's good to have somebody that's shown some dedication, interest, and really, I can tell you when a zoning or a planning or a comp plan issue will come to the council, I fully anticipate Mr. Stravens will be able to point you to not only the section of the code, but also the subsection that's relevant. So he's got a very good understanding of the city code.
Are there any questions from the council for myself or Mr. Wurst regarding the requested appointment?
Do we need to be concerned about the timing of the appointment? Does Kelly have anything he needs to finish out at the Planning Commission level?
My understanding is that if he's appointed this evening, then he will fairly quickly submit his resignation to the Planning Commission. We'll go about filling his position.
Okay.
Well, and I would just follow up. Appointment to the City Council is de facto resignation of the Planning Commission. Those are incompatible offices under Washington law, so he can only serve in one or the other, but not both. So I think he's fully aware of the potential of being appointed to the City Council, and so that will just mean the Planning Commission will commence on its next endeavors at its meeting, and then also appoint a chair.
Okay.
So, because at this time, I would look for a motion from the council to approve appointment of Mr. Stravens to the City Council to serve out the remainder of Ms. McLaughlin's term.
I make a motion to appoint Kelly Stravens to the vacant City Council position for the remainder of Kate McLaughlin's term.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I agree with Christine and Brian. I think it would be an asset to the council.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Any other discussion? Not seeing or hearing any further discussion, all in favor of the appointment, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, Mr. Stravens is hereby appointed to serve out the remainder of Ms. McLaughlin's term on the Planning Commission. Because Kelly could not be in attendance tonight, Kelly will be sworn in prior to our next regular meeting and be seated at the next meeting of the Millwood City Council. So thank you very much for your consideration and approval of Mr. Stravens. That ends our action items for this evening and brings us to our other items. The next item on item number 9 is the dedication of the local fiscal recovery funds. Ms. Mackin, do you want to start with that?
Sure. Right now, we're just looking for guidance in, I've created this worksheet. Our original dedications in the left column there totaled $222,000. As you can see by the expenditures, we did not expend nearly as much on utility grants as anticipated, and everyone was caught up at that point. So for the future, the coming tranche, which is in June of this year, I'd like to dedicate the $7,500 to the nonprofit, the remaining $42,000 to the well generator, and the remaining balance to revenue replacement, if that suits the council. Are there any questions on any of that?
Any questions from the council? Basically what we're asking is because we have been allowed by the federal government to dedicate up to $10 million of our ARPA funds, which we don't have anywhere near that, to revenue replacement, and we are not looking at expending anywhere near the funds with the assigned or allowed tranches. We would look to ask the council if it would be acceptable to bring forward a resolution to dedicate the remaining balances of our ARPA funds to revenue replacement, and as such, those funds would be placed into the general fund of the city of Millwood.
I think I'd actually bring a budget amendment to you with all of that included.
I think the council's agreeable to that
Okay.
proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
So we will prepare that for the next meeting and bring forward the resolution or the budget amendment, I'm sorry, Debbie, at that time.
Thank you.
So that brings us to item 9B, which is employee recognition of Daniel Hecox. Mr. Allen, would you like to lead that, please?
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure to do that. So I had a conversation with our attorney, Brian, last month, and we were talking about some of the things that have come up from some of the employees, and Daniel's name came up for the grant that he worked on. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to do a recognition. So I just want to start out with all the staff members have their own gifts to share and should be recognized. But tonight I wanted to recognize Daniel, for one thing in particular. But when I started thinking about all the achievements he's made in a short time at Millwood, it was apparent that there were many other things I should mention. First of all, today is actually Daniel's 6-year anniversary at working at Millwood. So in 2016, just a coincidence that we're actually doing the recognition on this day, but I did want to point that out. So Daniel came to us, started out as a seasonal employee at a time when we were building the retaining wall in the park, and we needed some extra help with the wall and maintaining the park. And he ended up being such a hard worker, we hired him full time. He's taken on numerous jobs and responsibilities besides his everyday workload, such as IT support for our computers and phones, because there's a lot of us that are technically challenged, myself especially. He's also taken on the task of learning the GIS to convert our hard copy utility maps to electronic mapping, which now we have the capability to access our phones in the field and use those maps. And most recently he's been conducting the pretreatment survey for our sewer system. Very grateful that he's stepped up to take charge on some of these things and volunteered. But the one thing in particular I wanted to recognize Daniel for was this year he volunteered to assist me with the tree board and to take on the task of writing a grant proposal, which is no easy task. Anybody that's ever written one knows that there's a lot of work that goes into that. And this was his first time doing it. He did his research on previous grants, collected data, and through a collaboration with the tree board, composed several drafts before submitting the application to DNR. And on his first try, Daniel was able to secure a $20,000 grant from DNR for the tree board for this coming year. The grant will enable us, the city, to hire a consultant to update our tree inventory, perform a tree analysis, and develop a management plan to ensure a healthy tree canopy for the present and future citizens of Millwood. The city is very fortunate to have people like Daniel that truly care about the Millwood community, and I look forward to seeing what other projects you take on in the future. Thank you for your service, Daniel.
So I would just like to echo what Paul had said, and I am saddened that I can't be there in person because Daniel has really stepped up with respect to all of the activities dealing with the city's implementation of ArcGIS, and anything that comes out of the future with any type of GIS support that the city has, either through what you will see for our street trees and tree inventory, or for being able to find our fire hydrants or our water services or sewer mains or any of that stuff, is based on the hard work that Daniel has taken on in learning ArcGIS on his own volition. And so he has been extremely dedicated in self-starting and self-learning all of that issue, all of those programs, at the same time of completing his own work and his own tasks on a daily basis. So Daniel, I echo Paul's sentiments, and the city is extremely lucky to have someone like you in our employ. And so thank you very much for your hard work and dedication.
Hey, Mayor, this is Brian Worst. Can I add a quick comment?
Sure, please.
Yeah, I just, again, really wanted to compliment Paul and the city for recognizing Daniel in this context. I, too, wish I could have been there because I would have had him sit in your chair and not my chair. So, but I do want to compliment him and say great work, so I appreciate it.
You and I are going to have words, Counselor.
Daniel would like it very much if we would move on now, I think.
All right. Well, Daniel, thank you very much. And hey, Paul, how many jurisdictions got a tree award from DNR?
Oh, was there 20? There's 20, but there was only a couple on the east side. So, yeah, there was 5 on this side. So.
Yeah. So we were one of the 5. So anyway, Daniel did a great job on that grant, and it was very impressive as the first time out for doing that. And it was a testament to the fact that we were one of the 5 on the east side of the Cascades that actually received some money from the state for what we had proposed to do. So thank you very much, Daniel, for that. So that brings us to item 9C, which is our administrative report for our 6-year Transportation Improvement Plan, the TIP. Paul.
Okay. Christina, you got that slide? What do you mean? I talked to you about that a couple days ago. Otherwise, I'm just going to be reading it.
Slide. What slide?
What slide?
Here comes the 6-year, the Excel.
Yeah. Hey, I don't do presentations very often, so. Yeah, this is the one.
Paul, once a year we ask you to do a tip presentation. Come on, man.
No, I know, but I don't usually have a PowerPoint or anything. I just kind of tell you what it is. So this was a little special this year. So I worked with our engineers last December with some of our projects to kind of get a better idea of what the actual true costs are of our projects. In the past, I have to admit that, we just kind of did a guesstimate as to what these costs were going to be. And most of the time, it's over a 6-year period that we're trying to forecast what these projects are. So I worked with the engineers. They took some cost estimates from the 2021 year, and then we ended up putting a cost escalator in there so that we'd be able to kind of get an idea of what these projects would end up costing. And, they added things in there that, I hadn't actually thought about when I was doing it myself. And so these are a lot truer numbers that we're looking at. So you're only able to see part of it. We'll probably have to scroll up a little bit. But for 2023, we've got the Widen the Argonne project with the turn pockets and that's the construction phase. So we're very hopeful that this project goes off in 2023. We've had some delays on this project. The cost of the project for the construction portion of it is almost $2.7 million at this point. Overall, it's probably about a $4 million project by the time we've gone through all the engineering and everything else that's gone through here. So anyway, we're hoping that that project goes for 2023. We also had in there, we don't have, that one's funded. The other project that we had in there was a grind and overlay on Argonne between Euclid and South Riverway. That, I'm not sure it's actually going to go. We're going to have to figure out what we're going to do for that. That may get delayed a little bit. It'd be nice to do that project at the same time that we do the Argonne project. That way we don't have to disrupt the traffic for the 1 year instead of doing a back-to-back thing. But that is a $240,000 project to grind and overlay that. So we'll be continuing to look for additional funding for that project, so hopefully we can piggyback that onto the same project. 2024, so these were kind of just placed in there, as we kind of roll it over from year to year. So we've got a couple of traffic calming projects in there. One of them is on Empire from Boeing to Butler. The other one was actually also adding a bike lane on Empire. Those we may have to reprioritize because once we do the Argonne project, we'll have a better understanding of how the traffic is actually going to react on that. And if that project doesn't go till 2023, we may have to just push that back just a little bit so we can get a better analysis of what's going on Empire before we just move forward with trying to do the traffic calming on there. So these numbers these projects will probably be moved around from time to time, but the point is that we want to put these on our transportation improvement plan because that makes us eligible for funding. So we've got them in there, and like I said, as things come up, road conditions change, things change, so it's flexible. But as long as it's on our tip, we're eligible for the funding. For 2025, we had an Argonne grind and overlay at Trent and Buckeye. It's a fairly short piece of road, but it's a very expensive piece of road. You can see that there was the original, just the grind and overlay would be almost 200,000. But because it's failed so much in that area, the red portion over on the right-hand side is actually what the engineer's recommendation is, and that would be to do a complete remove and replace and new subbase in there, because there's just so much volume of heavy traffic in that area. The other project was a chip seal. So we've got several chip seals on the schedule. As you recall, we've done a couple of chip seals over on Grace and Buckeye area. It's held up really well, and they're fairly inexpensive to do, so it really gives you a lot more years on your top surface of your pavement. So we've got one for 2026, or a couple for 2026, and then another one for 2027 on Buckeye between Argonne and Sargent, which is an area that we didn't do. And then for 2028, it would be a grind and overlay from Buckeye to Euclid. The last time we had Argonne actually paved was in 2009. So it's been a while, and it was holding up really beautifully until the last couple of years, and now you can really see the top surface of that getting some cracks in there. So we may end up going in there and doing some preventative maintenance just to buy a little bit more time out of this. But these are all projects that are going to need to be addressed. So anyway, as you can see right now, they're currently all unfunded. So we'll have to look for funding for these. And like I said, we will probably reprioritize these. So Argonne, I'm not sure will actually last till 2028. We'll have to kind of play with these. And so those other projects that are not high priority will probably get pushed to the back. The other ones will push forward. So at the June meeting, we'll be having the hearing for the TIP. This is mostly for information for this meeting so that you had an idea. I may end up reprioritizing these after talking with the engineers, so there may be some changes in that, but the figures will change a little bit too as we move those projects that were slated out for 2028, 2027. If we move those forward, we've got a 4% escalator in that, so every time we move that back or forward, it changes the cost on that. So, and this year, last year was probably a better gauge of what the prices were like. This year is not a really good gauge because of just the dynamics of everything that's going on in the world and the fuel costs, which trickle down to the asphalt cost. Yeah. So, anyway, that's our 6-year transportation improvement plan. Any questions?
So on the Argonne grind and overlay, does that just run up to the concrete intersection up there where that lip is always?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got some issues there. We've got another one down by the bridge. So anytime you have concrete and asphalt where they meet, there's always a lip because the concrete doesn't move and the asphalt gets soft and you got that heavy traffic on there. And so it just kind of squishes out and causes that little lip in there. So grinding it sometimes, you grind it, but it just makes it thinner. So sometimes you have to actually cut it out and then re-pour the asphalt.
Yeah. That's all I had, Kevin.
Well, and go ahead, Sean, sorry.
No, that's all I had. I just wanted to know about the concrete joints where the asphalt meet.
Now, one of the things you can see, and you can see it anywhere around town, is that last year when we had that heat dome move through with those incredible hot temperatures, it really did a number on the asphalt concrete joints, and that's everywhere in the city. So, as Paul said, we'll be bringing this forward as a resolution at the June meeting for council consideration. We will have some opportunities on the Argonne project to look for some additional funding. Right now, the state is having a time meeting their own obligation targets, and so there is some opportunity to request even more funding from state at the WashDOT level for projects of regional significance, which the Argonne project, the Argonne widening, is one. So we will be discussing that further internally and with SRTC later on this week. So are there any other questions for Paul on the tip? Excellent. So not seeing or hearing any other questions for Paul, so that brings us to item number, sorry, I got down in my regular agenda. Apologize. There we go. So that brings us to item number 10, which is our department report. So, Paul, why don't you just roll into the Public Works report, please? Thank you.
I'll do that. I still have my mic on, so I'll just keep on rolling. How's that? So for the water.
Sounds good.
Okay, the water and sewer report. So the water, the backflow testing letters went out in April. Lisa got those out there. And then we also did our potential contaminant source inventory report, updated for 2022. We're working on the consumer confidence report that is due by July. We've been working on the pretreatment surveys for the sewer, which Lisa and Daniel have been working adamantly on, and we're starting to get some responses back now. We did this a couple of years ago, just before COVID started, so like the week before or a week after we sent the letters out, everything shut down, including the city hall. And so we didn't get the responses back. So now that we've trying to get this back on track and get the preliminary survey out of the way, then we can move forward with the pretreatment. And that will help us to meet our commitments with Spokane County Utilities per our agreement. Street Argonne project, I think Kevin gave you a little bit of an update as to what's going on there. We finally did get a cost estimate from the UP Railroad, which has been holding up quite a bit of the progress of the project. The cost was significantly higher than what we had anticipated, even though we had anticipated high. So we'll be having a meeting with the railroad and the UTC, and we'll be reviewing the scope and costs before we enter into any agreement with UP Railroad. We just went over our tip. You guys have been busy, with the weather being so crazy. It's been tough to do some of the projects that we wanted to do outside or inside. We've got had some painting and stuff to do in the restrooms and do the upgrades, finish the upgrades that we had in there with the sinks, and we had some issues with material supply chain, which seems to be a big issue with everything anymore. That's finally all been resolved, and restrooms should be open by the end of the week. Be in time for the farmers market and the nice weather that we're hopefully going to get by this weekend. City's been busy doing the sprinklers and fertilizing, and take care of all the green spaces as well. We also planted a new tree over on Dalton and Argonne for the Arbor Day celebration on April 29th. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go by there and see that, but in our new public parking area that we have back there behind the Millwood businesses, there was a little space in there for the barrier between the sidewalk and the parking that we'd anticipated we would want to put some type of a tree in there, so that's what we did. And it turned out pretty nice. It's a nice looking tree. Looking forward to the fall when we could see the color of it. It's going to be a bright, brilliant red. So As I mentioned, the city did receive the grant from DNR, and much large part due to Daniel, and we thank him for that, his efforts. So the tree board will be putting out a selection for a consultant. We can't expend any funds until July, but we can go ahead and do the selection process and get that going. So we're only about 2 months out from being able to work forward on this project. We're getting quotes for new LED lighting in the city hall, the shops, and out there at the tennis courts, which that'll be a huge energy savings for us and a lot better lighting. One of the other projects we have is we've got those older notice boards that you've seen around where we do the public postings. Christina was able to procure some nice looking notice boards, and so you should be seeing those going up here in the next week. So that's my report.
Mayor Freeman, let the
questions for
record
Paul?
show that at 7:49, Councilmember Sander joined the meeting.
I can see him sitting down, so that's awesome. So one thing I would ask the council for Paul's report is to go by and take a look at the tree that is there near the alley on Dalton, just west of Bottles. One of the things about that tree is that is a much larger caliper size or diameter trunk size, and that is the goal of the city to utilize that caliper size or potentially even larger for replacement for street trees. We have, if you notice in the median, the Dalton median, we have a few trees that we put in quite a few years ago that just have not gotten much growth, which is to be expected because they were small diameter trees. But I think for our stuff, our city, and what I hope comes out of our urban forestry plan that the tree board is working on, et cetera, is that we begin considering using larger diameter trees to accelerate the growth process and give us a leg up when we put these when we replace a tree or if somebody adds a tree, et cetera, et cetera. So please go by, take a look at it. It's a beautiful tree, and that size of tree and that type of tree will factor into discussions that we will be having about funding for urban forestry as we go forward over the next few years. So it's something for council to be aware of and consider. So any other questions for Paul on anything on his report? If there is nothing, let's go to the treasurer's report. Debbie, please.
I don't have anything to report at this time. Thank you.
Have we addressed all the outstanding items with the auditor? Are we all clean on that now?
They're still working on the audit.
Okay. So it's in somebody else's hands though, right?
Yeah. Yep, just waiting on them.
Any questions for Debbie on anything we have going on the treasurer's front? Not hearing anything, so let's move on to Christina to do the mop-up on clerk, planning, and code enforcement. Ms. Jansen, please.
From the clerk's office, you've, I'm sure, noticed that your agendas and the minutes that are in the packets are looking a little bit different than they used to. We have pretty much completely transitioned over to the Granicus agenda and minutes platform that you all authorized the purchase of last year. The final portion of that is sending out to our email distribution list so that they can get signed up for the new meeting agendas and minutes. So that process is pretty much complete now, and this is how you can expect things to look going forward. From the Planning Department, the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing and make a recommendation on the large update to the zoning code. They will be approving those findings at the June meeting, and then that draft zoning code will become, let me back up. Their meeting at the end of May is being moved to June 1st to accommodate some travel conflicts. And so at their June 1st special meeting, they will approve the findings, and then the new code will come to the City Council for approval at your June meeting. Code enforcement, we are having an uptick in code enforcement complaints. We're getting a fairly steady flow of those, so Kyle and I are working on those. I did want to once again remind you about the May 21st City Workday. I have not got confirmation from anyone that they will be attending, but I'm sure you're all looking forward to it. That will be at 9 o'clock in the park. You can supervise with just one wing. You can supervise.
I will, I'll be there.
Okay, thank you. I will not be there, but Paul is looking forward to it, so.
Good to see you there. Oh, I know. Somebody else set it up and then decided to take a trip.
Anyhow, moving right along, Paul will look forward to seeing you in the park at 9 a.m. on Saturday the 21st. The farmers market kicks off its season on Wednesday the 25th in the park, so keep that in mind. And other than that, I don't have anything else unless you have any questions for me.
Any questions for Christina? Thank you very much, Christina. Appreciate the report, and we'll be looking forward to the cleanup day on the 21st. I know I'll be there. So that brings us to item number 10D, which is my mayor's report. But what I'd like to do is my report this evening was going to be to report out to the council options for procedures related to the new House Bill 1329 regarding Open Public Meetings Act revisions. I asked Mr. Wurst to put together a brief set of options for public participation and comment. And what I'd like to ask at this time, if Brian would take the council through some ideas or formats for public comment and accepting public comment and addressing public comment under the revisions made to the OPMA by 1329. So, Mr. Wurst, if you're ready, and Christina, if you're ready, if you could lead the council through some of these ideas that we would potentially implement at our next meeting. It's not something they have to decide on and approve, but it is something that I would like some feedback from the council as to how they would like to handle public comment for their meetings. So, Brian, take it away, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, let me just apologize for everybody not being there. I had a bit of a fever on my way to City Hall this evening. Thought best of taking a home test. Did not like the results of the first test, so took a second test. The second test confirmed the first test, so I am sitting at home now for the next 5 days after my whenever my symptoms subside. So. So it looks like I can see y'all on the camera. It looks like you are reviewing the document that was that I drafted that just talks about comment options. The bill 1329, which we talked about in open government training, really kind of did an overhaul, as we talked about, in terms of upending the Open Public Meetings Act and providing certain rights to comment that didn't necessarily, public comment that didn't necessarily exist, even though just about every jurisdiction followed them. What we have is a number of options that I laid out in this memo, at least 7 I could come up with, and there's probably a math equation that shows more options than 7. But we have various options of written or verbal comment that we can put in place. And I think the intent is not only for these options to be adopted by the council or implemented at the council level, but this is what we would use to the extent public comment would be provided at any of the commission meetings as well. The only nuance that we just need to be mindful of is that we have to provide an opportunity for comment, whether oral or written testimony, at any meeting in which there'll be action. And then another provision in that section means that public comment, we are not obligated to provide public comment on items not on the agenda. The nuance is that we have to be able to provide an opportunity for at least a verbal comment submitted by some sort of remote access to the extent an individual will have difficulty attending the meeting by reason of disability, limited mobility, or any other reason that makes physical attendance at a meeting difficult. I think we've proven that to be to be accessible for the city. At least I'm not sure that those in remote attendance are disabled or limited mobility, but we show that we have the ability to provide that on the fly. So essentially what we're looking for is how would the council prefer to move forward with accepting comments? And, I'll just kind of go through the first, the options that seem, I don't want to jump into your policy, but seem the most palatable, which is, I think, one of the reasons for written comment, or verbal comment for that matter, one of the reasons for requiring it on any action items on the agenda, any action or any items that the council will take action on, is you want the public to give you their opinions, their thoughts, their concerns about what you're going to take action on. With that said, there are limitations to verbal comment. I think as we've seen on some very important or hot or focus issues of the city, when 6 or 7 people show up at a city council meeting and are expressing their verbal comments on one item, you may not have had a sufficient time to fully consider those comments in your decision-making process, which is largely the reason why I believe the legislature incorporated a written testimony, a written comment component, which can require that those comments be submitted 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever the city council wishes to choose prior to the meeting. So those would then be provided to you in anticipation of the meeting so you could actually consider them as you're going through your deliberative process at the meeting. That wasn't the norm of the city. I will admit that the city often took verbal comment, but there were times where verbal comment was just not given. You just weren't given a full opportunity to consider that with verbal comment at the meeting in which you were making the decision. And there are meetings where you're called upon that you have to make the decision at that meeting, whether it's a planning issue, whether it's a zoning issue, whether it's a budget issue. There are times where you have to take those actions. So we have a number of options that can call for written public comment only on items on the agenda. We have written comment or verbal comment on items on the agenda. You have an opportunity to provide just a general public comment section, whether verbal or written. A number of options that you might choose. What I am starting to see, it hasn't been fully determined by all jurisdictions locally, but I think given the legislature's incorporation of written comments submitted prior to the meeting, you are starting to see some of the jurisdictions move in that realm. Again, just to give you sufficient time to really consider those before you walk in and make a decision at the meeting. So, happy to answer any questions. I've tried to add any of the pros and cons on that sheet that I could think of, and again, there may be other pros and cons, but what we're doing is trying to balance the opportunity for the public to participate in the meetings with comment while still maintaining the orderly function of your own meetings.
So, as Brian presented, and again, my sincere apologies for not being physically present at the meeting tonight. It is the council's meeting, and what I would say is that Millwood has had a long-standing tradition of hearing individuals' concerns in person at a meeting, allowing the opportunity for people to speak to the council directly, verbally. The new House Bill 1329 does put specific requirements on hearing comment and considering that comment prior to any final action being taken. So what Brian has outlined and what I would suggest to the council, it is obviously council's meeting, and so that's why it's being bantered about tonight, is that if council should at a minimum take written comment up to 24 hours before a regular council meeting. This would provide council the opportunity to consider that comment and make it known to the public at large that written comment has been received. If the council wishes to have, and those are for items that are posted in the agenda for action by the council, for a final action by the council. If council wishes to continue or wishes to resume, I guess after the pandemic, having an opportunity for the public to come forth and address the council, then we could have a public remarks or public expressions period at some point in the agenda. But in order for council to hear and consider the citizens' viewpoints or comments prior to any decision making, I do think it's in the best interest of council to at this point consider limiting that to written comment or written expression. If council then wishes to change, and councilor, check me if I'm wrong, you can change at any time. You can change your format of how you accept public comment or public remarks at any time. We're not locked into something going forward. It's just a different landscape, but I want to definitely have the will of the council and understand what the council wants to do with respect to hearing public comment, both for items to be considered for action at that meeting, and then any other opportunity for the public to come forth and voice their concerns or expressions to the council in the course of business. So thoughts. I would ask Sean to lead it off if Sean has anything, and then kind of move around from there.
I think part of the hang-up don't we have to provide, if we're doing verbal comment, we have to provide for a remote methodology to receive those comments, and we may not have that worked out yet. So, or it would just be another technical complexity to add to this.
That is true. If you open the opportunity for public to come in person to comment on items for action at the meeting, then you also have to have the opportunity for individuals to remotely comment at the same time. We have that capability. We would have to work out if individuals could no longer just show up. They would have to register on the fly. They would have to pre-register in some way if they wanted to make verbal comment or oral comment to you in the same vein that somebody in person would want to make oral comment to you. We could do that. It would change the flow of your meetings obviously. We would have to consider time limits and things like that. But it would be possible. But yes, you are correct. We would have to then open up the idea of a remote access point for folks to be able to make oral comment remotely in the same way they would make oral comment physically at the meeting.
Andy or Dan, do you guys have anything?
This is Brian. There you
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure I hadn't lost my connection as you guys were deliberating and kind of looking at the material. So, I appreciate it.
Well, this is Dan. I like the idea of the verbal comments on the agenda as well as the public. I think if the verbal comments are significant enough to warrant further study or more research, we could always postpone the action. On the other hand, I understand the difficulties, and I don't know if that even I don't know. I think the opportunity for verbal comment is very important. I think we've had some good ones over the years, but I guess we just need to figure out, keep up with the technology and let people know if they've got a comment, they got to pre-register for the comments, and let it go with that. So I could go with either one or two, I think. I kind of like one with the idea we always table the motion if the, and there may be some bad feelings about that, but if it is significant enough that the majority of the council feels it needs to have more research or more time to consider, we can do that. I mean, very few of the things we do require immediate attention. I guess the other option to that is if it requires a public hearing, we've always had that opportunity to have input. So that's another. I don't know what to do with that thought, but there's another thought.
Well, and Dan, I would say that any item that requires a public hearing, budget, a comprehensive plan amendment, anything like that, that's not affected by this. That is something that we still have to do, and we still have to make that portion work. We don't get out of the statutory requirement of a public hearing on certain items.
Yeah, I understand. But
That is correct. Yeah, this is Brian. Yep.
And we don't need to have the same comments made 2 times in a row. We have the public hearing, that's the opportunity.
I like the option number 2.
So this is Brian.
I like the,
Go ahead, Brian.
If I could, I just wanted to add. So I think I broke the options down a couple ways, but I think one thing we want to look at is how you want to address the mandatory element of public comment on items on the agenda, which could be written or verbal, and then the discretionary option for the council. I see you, Andy. It's a little delayed on my video, but I see you. The discretionary option for comments not on the agenda and how the council wishes to address those, verbal or written. The mandatory, I think what I'm hearing, the really kind of the driver of the, at least some of the comments from the council right now is, on those mandatory comment items, providing it by written testimony or written comment and verbal comment seems to be kind of the preference of the council, which, is certainly a way to proceed forward, just keeping in mind that we will need to be able to address. We'll need to set in the meeting agenda notice some reasonable outline, or we'll have to identify a timeline in which requests for accommodation will need to be made. I'm thinking that that would probably have to be no later than at some point mid-Tuesday, just because council meeting days can be a little crazy. So maybe if it's easier that way, how you address the mandatory, and then if you want to review how the discretionary public comment, to the extent you want to provide it, how you want to address that's the other element of the equation, because they don't have to be treated the same. And again, emphasizing what the mayor said, we can look at this 2 months from now and say, this isn't working, we need to try something else. Or our technology is not accommodating the process, we need to try something else. Just as long as we touch on the mandatory components is what we're really needing to address first and foremost.
Did you want to speak?
I was just gonna say that I would prefer option 2. I think a written comment, you don't get people piggybacking what the first guy said in a verbal comment. So you have to think about it, you have to put it down. And I would prefer the written over the verbal. That's where I'm at.
Well, I'll say, Brian, we can change this at any time, right? So if we want to kind of stage this as beginning with written comment, I mean, I think everybody on council would like to receive verbal comments on everything at some point if we get to that as a goal. Like, I'm kind of aligned with Andy with option 2. It's always good to get verbal comment. But I think maybe we start with option 3 where we just accept written comment on everything and see how that goes at first. And then if people start attending more in person, because it's just we're coming out of 2 years of remote meetings and we're doing the hybrid meetings. So I wouldn't be against starting with written comment on everything and setting a reasonable deadline so that those written comments reach the council and everybody else on the staff. And then maybe we go month by month and see how the verbal may work in the future.
Ms. Beefy, do you have comment on this? So this is important, so we would be looking for any input from you as well.
I have to agree with Council Member Sanders. I think that, by definition, when the council meeting's adjourned, it's a citizens meeting, really, too. So I would like us to, I totally understand the other comments, and I can definitely see that being an incremental step forward, but I think the end goal is to eventually integrate some form of verbal comments back into our meetings.
So what I could offer up to the council, so for the 3 members in person and Ms. Beefy remotely, is item number 2, option number 2. The way I see item number 2 is written public comment for action items on the agenda, and then we could do written or verbal public comments for the general public as a form of public expression. And if we found that as we were working on, we could find a way to incorporate verbal public comment for action items on the agenda, we could do that. But I think from the starting point of the staff to try and engage how much comment we have come in, et cetera, I think maybe option number 2 would be the best for the city to start with, which would be, in my mind, an agenda would be posted an absolute minimum of 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And we would accept written comment up to 24 hours before the meeting. And that written comment would be limited to those items that were action items on the agenda. That comment would be received by the city, distributed to the council, and that comment would be acknowledged prior to beginning action items in the meeting. Somebody would simply say, we've received comment from XYZ, that comment pertains to ABC, and show that we had received that comment and that comment had been distributed to the council. Then we could have a portion of the meeting set aside for citizens to come forth and make comments to the council, either written or verbal, that would guide the council, but not necessarily be would be more general in comment. They would not be specific to action items that were presented as part of that meeting. And if we find, as Mr. Sander and Ms. Vesey have said, we want to get into oral comments on all items, including action items, we can look at that down the road and see if that is working and see how that works. I think maybe for us, it might work better. I know Spokane County, City of Spokane are looking at different options, but Millwood is small, and we may be able to make that work. But those are my thoughts on the idea. If you have, but as I said, it is City Council's meeting. It's your meeting, and you tell us how you want that meeting to go.
I feel we could use option 2 as a good way to get started. And folks always have the ability to write, so. And perhaps we could even provide a format that they could fill in the box, whatever their comment would be. Make it easier for them to, rather than a blank piece of paper. So I think option 2, I could go for that.
Mr. Culler or Mr. Van Hees,
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I'm okay with that. Do we need a motion, or is this just direction to staff to implement this in a future meeting?
This is just direction to us. Ms. Vesey, are you okay with that right now? Or we can consider it in the future?
Yes.
Excellent. So we don't need a motion. It is simply something that we, as the city, need to implement the rationale and the procedure in order to comply with 1329. So based on Mr. Worth's analysis, that does comply with 1329. We can start from there, and we can revisit this as often as council would like, and the city will provide feedback to council to show how this is working. But I think this is a good point to start with. I want to make sure that we are in full compliance with 1329, giving citizens and others an opportunity to provide comment. But I also want to make sure that our business gets done, your business gets done, and that you have all the comments available for you to consider in a timely fashion. Mr. Sanders' comment regarding we can table the motion pretty much works for most stuff, but there are times that we do have things come up that if you're not in possession of your facts beforehand and need to make a decision at this meeting, it might be kind of hard to table things. So I want to make sure that as decision makers, you folks have everything available to you when you need to make the decision. So I think we can do that. We can start with that with number 2. Any other questions from anyone on the council for Brian or myself on that? But we'll get that ginned up for the next meeting and be ready to implement that at the June meeting. So I'm not hearing anything, so that takes us to item 10E, which is our legal report. Brian, you got anything else you want to talk about?
Sure. No, not on mute. Yeah, no, I have nothing further to talk about. I think you'll see a little bit more notice on public comment in the next meeting agenda, and we will go back. Recall that the City Council back in 2018 adopted some public participation guidelines that we'll need to revamp in light of 1329 as well. So, And I think, hearing the discussion of the council tonight, it would be my suggestion that we amend the public participation guidelines, not to say option 2 will be the only option. It will just incorporate that there are various options that may be chosen, and the option for that meeting will be as reflected in the meeting agenda and notice of meeting as posted by the city for each meeting. So that'll give you some flexibility as we proceed on, because I think, as you recognize, there may be items where you may want to encourage more public participation at a meeting, and then you may just have a quick agenda where written comments are entirely appropriate given the lack of items on the agenda. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Brian. And I apologize to the council. That did slip my mind that we did have a resolution regarding public participation. So, yeah, Brian and I and staff will revise that and look at that accordingly. So, my apologies. If there's nothing else with department reports, any questions for the council? You have item number 11, which is your information items, no action or discussion, which is the sheriff's report and the scraps report. At this time, that brings us to council remarks. So, Ms. Beasy, any comments or remarks?
I would like to also extend my congratulations to Daniel, and I look forward to future talks about GIS and urban forestry. Thank you.
Thanks, Shauna. So, Mr. Culler, any comments?
I'll echo that. Thanks, Daniel, for your service to the city.
Mr. Van Hees?
Brian, would you let me know how to do the open public meeting thing that I missed last couple weeks ago? And how I can get that?
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that. Hey, Daniel, way to go.
That's
that hat.
Good point.
And that's it.
Thanks, Andy. Mr. Sander, comments?
Well, first, my apologies for still being on standard time, but I just ran out of it today. And congratulations to Daniel, and thank you. And I guess I need to renew my open meetings timetable also. That's been a couple of years.
Well, maybe you and Andy can go together someplace. I'm sure there's a few things on the web you can get your OPMA and PRA trainings at. So there you go. Announcements. Christine, do we have any announcements other than the cleanup day coming up?
No, nothing more than that.
Hey, Christina, would you remind the council about the cleanup day on the 21st?
This is just a quick reminder about the City Cleanup Day on May 21st. That's Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. at Millwood City Park. You can look for Paul, our Public Works Director. He'll be leading the charge. There'll be donuts and coffee, and we expect to see you there. Thanks so much.
That's the same day as the tire pickup day?
Same day as the tire pickup event at the east end of the park.
Is that tires and rims or just tires?
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
We're not ready. We're not ready yet. We have to set the next meeting. All right.
I've never heard the clerk call for a motion to adjourn. That's great.
Clerk is like, get me out of here. Anyway, so if there's no further announcements, that brings us to setting our next meeting. The next regular meeting of the City Council is June the 14th of 2022, unless we have enough City Council members present at the May 21st City Cleanup Day that we need to have a special meeting notarized. So if you are going to be there, and we do have a quorum of City Council, we need to let people know that that might be a special meeting. Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting of the Millwood City Council is now adjourned. Thank you very much for showing up. We appreciate it.
Thank you all.
I signed it.
Yeah, I wanted you.
Well, mine's the signature on it. I didn't.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I just printed it. So, yeah.
Really?